The river is choked with men. They come through the morning haze in dense ranks of oxhide shields and stabbing spears, feet hammering the earth so hard the ground seems to tremble under them. The reeds along the Mhlathuze shiver. Dust hangs low over the plain. Somewhere ahead, an enemy kingdom is trying to regroup, trying to breathe, trying to understand how a people so small could move with such terrible precision. But there is no time left for that. The Zulu regiments are already spreading outward, bending around the flanks, closing from the front, tightening from behind. Not a raid, not a feud, a system, a machine, and at the center of it all stands the man who made this possible, Shaka, the son of a minor chief, the outcast child of a disgraced mother, the warrior who takes a clan of perhaps fewer than 1,500 people and turns it into the most feared military power in southeastern Africa. How does something like that happen? How does a boy marked by humiliation become the architect of a new kind of war? And when a state is forged so quickly, so violently, so brilliantly, what exactly has been created? A kingdom, an empire, or a weapon that will eventually devour its own maker? This is the story of how Shaka Zulu turned a small clan into a war machine. To understand the force he unleashed, you have to step back into a world that was already under strain. Early 19th century southeastern Africa is not an empty wilderness waiting for a conqueror. It is a crowded, contested, deeply political landscape stretching between the Indian Ocean and the Drakensberg, threaded with rivers, grazing lands, trade routes, cattle paths, rival chiefdoms, and old loyalties. Power here is measured in people, in herds, in access to land and water, in the ability to protect followers and punish enemies. Cattle are wealthy, kinship is structured, age and status matter, so does rain, and rain has been failing. A series of droughts helps sharpen every old tension. Land becomes more precious, pasture becomes more fragile, hunger turns disputes into blood feuds. At the same time, the region is being pulled into wider economic pressures around the trade networks of Delagoa Bay. Ivory, cattle, and prestige goods are tied to competition far beyond any single valley. Chiefdoms are rising and absorbing weaker neighbors. Alliances shift. Warfare is intensifying before Shaka becomes famous for it. That part matters, because one of the longest shadows over this history is the temptation to treat Shaka as if he burst from nowhere and single-handedly created all the chaos around him. He did not. He emerged from a world already moving toward larger political formations, already under environmental stress, already sharpening itself on scarcity and rivalry. But if he did not invent the crisis, he mastered it, and in mastering it, he changed the scale of what conflict could become. Among the many Nguni-speaking chiefdoms in the region, the Zulu are small, one name among hundreds. They are not yet the center of the map. They are not yet the name that will echo from Natal to London. They are a minor clan near the White Umfolozi, vulnerable, local, easy to overlook. Then history places a dangerous mind inside that small frame. Shaka was born around 1787, the son of Senzanga Kona, chief of the Zulu, and Nandi. From the beginning, his place in the world is unstable. Later traditions preserve the sting of scandal around his birth and the contempt directed at his mother. Whether every detail survives in perfect form is less important than the pattern they reveal. This is a childhood marked by exclusion. His parents separate. He and Nandi leave his father's homestead. They seek refuge first among the Langeni and later under the protection of the powerful Mthethwa. That exile matters as much as any battlefield, because Shaka does not grow up secure in inheritance. He grows up learning what it means to be vulnerable, to be mocked, to live under the authority of others. He sees power from below before he ever wields it from above. He learns what humiliation feels like in the body. For some people, that becomes a wound. In him, it becomes fuel. At the court of Dingiswayo, leader of the Mthethwa, the exiled boy finds the environment that will shape him. Dingiswayo is one of the major political innovators of the region, a ruler already involved in the broader process of reorganizing military age grades and extending central authority. Under him, Shaka enters the Amabutho, the age-based regimental system. He does not merely serve, he rises. He distinguishes himself as a fighter, then as a commander. He absorbs discipline, organization, and the political uses of military force. He watches how a loose constellation of people can be drawn into something larger. He learns that war is not only a clash of bodies, it is administration, timing, nerve, intelligence, shock. He also learns that authority belongs to the man who can protect, command, and endure. When Senzanga Kona died around 1816, the Zulu succession opened. Shaka is not the obvious heir, but he has something more valuable than birth order, backing. Dingiswayo lends him support. With Mthethwa assistance, Shaka moves against his half-brother Sigujana and takes control of the Zulu chieftaincy. At that moment, the future empire was still tiny. The Zulu are still small, but the logic of their leadership has changed completely. Shaka does not inherit a great state. He inherits a narrow base and treats it as raw material. His transformation of Zulu power is often remembered through a handful of famous images: the short stabbing spear, the great shield, the relentless advance, the horns of the bull formation closing around an enemy. Some of these methods had precedence in the wider region. Shaka's genius is not that he creates every element from nothing. It is that he sharpens, standardizes, centralizes, and weaponizes them with unusual intensity. He pushes warriors into close combat. Instead of relying mainly on lighter throwing spears and brief skirmishes, he emphasizes the stabbing assegai, a weapon that demands nerve, training, and brutal proximity. This is not just a change in equipment, it is a change in psychology. Men are now expected to kill face to face, shield against shield, breath against breath, in the crush where hesitation is fatal. He reorganizes regiments by age and service. He quarters them in military settlements. He binds them more tightly to the king. He makes them visibly legible through shield patterns, ornaments, ranks, and discipline. He toughens them through hard movement over rough ground, demanding speed and endurance. He drills them into tactical cohesion. The main line, the chest, fixes the enemy in place. The horns sweep outward to encircle. The reserve waits, controlled, held back until the crucial moment. This is warfare, not as a brawl, but as choreography. And then there is the most important innovation of all, continuity. Many societies can produce bravery in flashes. What Shaka builds is an institution that can repeat violence in organized form, campaign after campaign, season after season, a force that can march, strike, absorb, and expand, a machine. What happened next is the leap from experiment to legend. The first targets are nearby chiefdoms. Some are subdued by force. Some are drawn in through intimidation, diplomacy, or promises of protection. Shaka is not simply massacring everything in his path. That older caricature misses how state formation actually works. He is selective. Chiefdoms that do not threaten him may keep a degree of autonomy if they submit. Others are broken and incorporated. Defeated people are not always annihilated. Many are absorbed, their men folded into regiments, their local identities subordinated to a larger Zulu order. This is how a small clan becomes a larger political organism, not only by killing enemies, but by turning survivors into components. Then the strategic landscape shifts violently. Dingiswayo, Shaka's mentor and sometime overlord, is killed in the struggle against the Ndwandwe, the great rival power to the north under Zwide. In one stroke, the old Mthethwa-centered balance collapses. The patron who helped raise Shaka is gone. The Zulu chief is suddenly exposed to a stronger enemy, and a wider vacuum of authority. This should have been the moment he was crushed. Instead, it becomes the moment he grows dangerous beyond recall. Shaka absorbs much of the leaderless Mthethwa following. More people, more legitimacy, more military manpower, but also more enemies, more obligations, and a direct collision course with Zwide's Ndwandwe kingdom. Now the stakes rise from succession politics to regional supremacy. If Shaka loses, the Zulu disappear back into the anonymity from which they came, perhaps shattered entirely. If he wins, the political map of southeastern Africa will be redrawn, and this is where the story stops being merely about a gifted commander and becomes something larger, about momentum itself, about what happens when charisma, discipline, and historical crisis lock together. The Zulu reputation spreads in widening circles. Neighboring chiefs hear of regiments that move faster than expected, strike harder than expected, and refuse the old rhythms of disengagement. The king at the center is said to be severe, exacting, impossible to ignore. Followers see greatness, enemies see a storm. Both are right. By the early 1820s, the Zulu state had expanded dramatically between the Tugela and Pongola rivers. Trade links add new dimensions to its power. Contact at Delagoa Bay and later at Port Natal ties the kingdom into a changing world of coastal exchange. European traders begin to notice Shaka. They come with goods, curiosity, and pens. They will help carry his name outward, sometimes in awe, sometimes in distortion, often with all the sensationalism that clings to powerful African rulers in colonial writing. But before legacy comes the ordeal, because none of this rising grandeur erases the fundamental problem facing Shaka. The Ndwandwe still exist. Zwide's kingdom is large, hardened, and formidable. This is not a simple story of genius defeating incompetence. The Ndwandwe are one of the major powers of the age. Their conflict with the Zulu is the kind of struggle that decides which state will organize the region and which will be broken apart by it. Oral traditions preserve an earlier Zulu success against them, often associated with Kwakli Hill, though the details are debated. What matters beyond dispute is that the contest continues, and that sooner or later it must end in a decisive unmaking. If you're drawn to long-form history that treats the past with this kind of scale and seriousness, stay with the story, subscribe, and let me know in the comments which overlooked empire or ruler we should bring to life next. Because what happens now is the hinge on which everything turns. The real turning point comes when the struggle with the Ndwandwe reaches the Mhlathuze. Sources differ on the exact sequence and tactical particulars, as they often do when oral history, later recollection, and written records overlap. But the broad outline is clear enough. Zwide launches major pressure against Shaka. The Zulu do not simply survive it, they break it. Picture the scene: river country, open ground broken by channels, reeds, and movement paths, known to local fighters. Men exhausted by marches, by uncertainty, by the strange elasticity of a war that never quite settles into one front. Shaka understands something essential here. A larger enemy can be beaten if it is disrupted, separated, hit while off balance, and denied the ability to bring its strength to bear cleanly. His regiments are not merely brave, they are controlled. The Ndwandwe advance, expecting dominance. What they meet instead is a force drilled to absorb shock and answer it with structure. The Zulu chest comes on hard, locking the front, refusing collapse. The flanking elements work outward and inward, pressing at the edges, searching for dislocation. The reserve waits for the moment when pressure becomes panic. And in battle, panic is everything. Once an army begins to feel itself losing shape, defeat spreads faster than any spear thrust. A flank wavers, a crossing clogs. Men look sideways and see movement where certainty should be. Dust blinds, commands break. The river that promised escape becomes a trap. What began as a contest of kingdoms turns into a physical disaster of bodies bunching, stumbling, trying to flee through terrain that will not forgive hesitation. Then the machine closes. By the time the fighting is done, Ndwandwe power is shattered. Not erased in a single theatrical stroke, not as if history were a legend told by firelight, but broken in the way that matters most, politically, militarily, irreversibly. Its people scatter. Some groups move northward. Others form new trajectories across southern Africa. The Zulu stand not as one chiefdom among many, but as the central military state of the region, and that victory sends shockwaves far beyond any one battlefield. This is where the story grows darker, because when a power rises that fast, others do not simply submit in place. They run, they split, they raid elsewhere, they collide with other communities already under strain. The upheavals of the period, later known as the Mfecane or Difecane, spread suffering across huge distances through war, migration, state building, and cascading displacement. Older narratives laid all of this at Shaka's feet, as though one monstrous will alone explained everything. That is too simple, and it served colonial myths all too well. The region had already been destabilized by drought, competition over land and trade, and wider political pressures. But it is equally false to pretend Shaka's expansion was a minor factor. His victories accelerated the scale of transformation. They intensified the chain reaction. This is the contradiction at the heart of his achievement. The war machine protects, organizes, and enlarges the Zulu state. It also helps set vast portions of the region in motion, with consequences measured in ruined homesteads, refugee columns, and kingdoms born from flight. At the center of the storm, Shaka becomes more powerful and more isolated. European visitors at Port Natal began encountering the Zulu Kingdom in the mid-1820s. They write about a ruler both magnetic and terrifying, a king fascinated by foreign goods, yet deeply confident in his own civilization. Through their accounts, filtered through misunderstanding and performance, Shaka begins his second life as a figure of story. Some details they preserve are valuable. Others are exaggerated or shaped by the expectations of men who liked their African rulers, either noble or savage, but rarely ordinary. With Shaka, ordinary was never an option. Inside the kingdom, centralization deepens. The regimental system is not just for war. It is a way of ordering society. Men are organized. Loyalties are redirected upward. Authority radiates from the king into military settlements, cattle distribution, marriage regulation, and the choreography of public obedience. The state becomes denser, more intrusive, more dependent on one commanding personality. And that is always dangerous, because systems built around extraordinary individuals inherit their strengths, but also their instability. If the ruler's judgment sharpens, the whole machine sharpens with him. If the ruler's fear grows, the whole kingdom feels it. Then Nandi dies. Her death in 1827 is remembered as a catastrophic emotional break in Shaka's life. Later accounts describe extreme mourning, wide killings, and prohibitions so severe that they have become central to the legend of his final year. Some of those stories may have been amplified in retelling. Powerful men attract lurid endings, but there is little doubt that this period is one of intensifying strain, grief, and brutality. A ruler forged by discipline and controlled violence begins to tip toward excess. The machine he created no longer feels merely efficient, it feels ravenous. He sends regiments on punishing operations. He imposes his will with increasing severity. Those around him, brothers, officers, subordinates, begin to understand a truth older than this kingdom and as permanent as politics itself. The man who made the state may now be endangering it. What nobody realizes, at least not fully, is how quickly the end will come. In September 1828, with major regiments away, the center was exposed. At Dukuza, near his military establishment, Shaka is attacked by a small conspiracy, his half-brothers Dingane and Mlangana, aided by the servant or bodyguard Mbopa. The details come down through later retellings, sharpened by memory and drama. But the outcome is certain. The great maker of Zulu power is stabbed and killed by men of his own household. The irony is almost too perfect. He spent years constructing discipline so ruthless it could break rival states. In the end, he cannot fully defend himself against the oldest weapon in monarchy, proximity. The immediate aftermath is swift and cold. Dingane seizes power. The succession is managed in the only way states like this can manage it, through elimination, consolidation, and the rapid claim to legitimacy. The machine does not stop. That is the point of a machine. It survives the hand that built it, at least for a time. But Shaka's death changes the emotional chemistry of the kingdom. Awe becomes memory. Fear becomes precedent. His reign hardens into something both historical and mythic almost at once. In the short term, he leaves behind a centralized military state, far larger and more formidable than the minor chiefdom he inherited. He has shown that the Zulu can dominate rival powers, absorb populations, and act on a regional scale. He has transformed social organization, military doctrine, and political authority. He has given the kingdom a momentum future rulers will inherit, struggle with, and sometimes exploit with remarkable effect. And the costs are everywhere, in graves, in burned homesteads, in the map itself. The longer legacy is even more extraordinary. The Zulu Kingdom Shaka forged does not vanish with him. Under later rulers, it remains one of the most powerful African states in the region. Decades after Shaka's death, that military inheritance will help make possible one of the greatest shocks in imperial history, the Zulu victory at Isandlwana in 1879, when a modern British force is overwhelmed by an African army whose discipline and aggressive doctrine still bear the deep imprint of the military order he helped build. But Shaka's afterlife is not confined to warfare. He becomes a symbol, warning, hero, tyrant, genius, monster, nation builder, destroyer. Colonial writers often exaggerate his cruelty until it serves their own politics, using African violence to excuse European conquest and the lie of empty land. In those tellings, the upheavals of the age become a convenient alibi for dispossession, as if history itself had cleared the ground for settlers. Later scholars push back, showing a much more complex world in which drought, trade competition, state formation, migration, and colonial pressure all interact. That correction matters. It restores historical depth to a past that propaganda tried to flatten. At the same time, anti-colonial and nationalist memory can elevate Shaka into a near superhuman founder, the embodiment of African strength and strategic brilliance. That, too, captures something real, though not the whole of him, because the true Shaka, so far as history can recover him, is more unsettling and more impressive than any simple legend. He is not great because he was pure. He is great because he understood, with terrifying clarity, how discipline, fear, loyalty, and speed could be fused into political power. He is also a reminder that state-building and destruction are often twins. A small clan becomes a kingdom becomes a military order remakes a region, and then the world spends 2 centuries arguing over what exactly it saw. Was Shaka a savage aberration, as colonial myth insisted? No. That story says more about the needs of empire than about the man himself. Was he merely a misunderstood reformer, unfairly blamed for forces beyond his control? Not that either. The suffering tied to his expansion was real. The violence was real. The fear he inspired was real. The transformation he achieved was also real. To reduce him to villain or hero is to miss the scale of the historical event, because the deeper truth is harder and more human. Shaka takes the vulnerabilities of his childhood, the humiliation, the exile, the insecurity of belonging, and translates them into a doctrine of absolute control. He does not trust weakness, so he trains endurance. He does not trust fragmentation, so he builds regiments. He does not trust the mercy of rivals, so he creates a state that moves faster and strikes harder than the world around it. In that sense, the Zulu war machine is not only a military system, it is a worldview. It is one man's answer to chaos, and like many powerful answers, it solves one problem by creating others on an even greater scale. That may be why the story still feels so modern, despite the shields and spears, the cattle paths and river plains. It is about the seduction of order in a violent world. It is about what people will endure and what rulers will demand when survival is on the line. It is about the brilliance required to build power and the blindness that power can produce once it begins to believe in itself too completely. In the end, Shaka did not just turn a small clan into a war machine, he turned political possibility itself into something harder, faster, and more dangerous. He proved that a people dismissed as minor could reorganize the terms of history. He proved that leadership can compress decades of change into a few brutal years. And he proved, too, that any machine built out of human fear and discipline carries within it the seeds of its own betrayal. If you want more history told with this kind of depth and gravity, subscribe, stay close, and join me for the next story.